Good morning, St. Lucas. It is good to share another morning with you as we begin our days together. Or maybe you're hearing this later in the day, or maybe you're using this as your evening devotion. But regardless of when we are gathering here together, I want to encourage you to do something. If you are close enough, I want you to stand up. I want you to walk wherever you need to, and I want you to find a mirror. And I want you to look into that mirror. So if you have one nearby, or maybe if you're watching this on your computer and you've got your phone nearby, pull it out, pull out that selfie camera, and take a look. Because I wonder when you look into the mirror, when you look into the camera on your phone, when you see your face, what it is that you see. Now, some of us have been given messages growing up that what we see there is something that we shouldn't be proud of. What we see there is something that we um, need to overcome, that we see someone who is imperfect, someone who is sinful, someone who is starting from a place that we have to overcome all of those things that mar, um, that deny what really might actually be the truth. Now, if you ask me what my favorite passage of scripture is, I have a few, but the one that I consistently find myself returning to, and the one that if you ask me to preach off the cuff, I probably would choose, is almost always going to be Genesis 1. Now, in this first creation story, we see all of the different parts of creation being brought to life by God. But then at the end of the story, just before God rests, there is a moment where God says, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness." God created humankind in God's image. In the image of God, He created them. And God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over all of the things that we just heard that God created." And it was so. God saw everything that God had made, and indeed it was, say it with me, very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day of creation. This is the story that I want you to think of every time you look in a mirror today. Every time you see a photo, every time you get a chance to see your image, this, this is the story that tells us what to see. Tells us to see our image made in God's image. That within us is the image of God. Now, that doesn't mean that God looks like us visually. It means that we have been invited into something so much more special than we could ever imagine. That we have some of the capacities that God has, that God has shared with us responsibility for the earth and for one another. And it's one thing to take that responsibility for someone or something else, but it starts with acknowledging the image of God within you. So I wonder what you see when you look in the mirror. Do you see a child of God? Do you see the image of God created with immense power and creativity and capability? And what we hear in Genesis 1, at our core, at our createdness in God's image, we see goodness. Believing the image of God within us, believing the goodness that has been placed at the core of who we are from our first created moments. That is our starting point. That is our starting point for all of those other responsibilities that Genesis 1 invites us into, for one another, for creation, for all of those around us. And as we continue to explore what it means to care for one another in a hard season because of the pandemic that we are experiencing, a hard season because of the division and the harm that we are seeing done all around us. If we can remember that the image of God lies within us, that goodness is the core of who we are, and that is how we operate. That is how we choose to put ourselves into the world, especially when we encounter another child of God, also with the image of God and God's goodness at their core. How might that change us? Us individually, but also us as a community. And I know some of you want to go straight to that community piece, but I want to challenge you today for this to be a day that you focus on the image of God within you. You focus on the goodness of God that is within you. And how does that change how you see the world, how you read your social media feed, and how you interact with your family and your friends and those that you come into contact with virtually and in person each and every day? How does that change you? And what does that look like? Probably looks like love. I look forward to hearing how your day has gone, looking in the mirror, looking at the faces of others, and seeing the image and the goodness of God there. I pray that that is a transformational moment. So go and be the image of God in the world, and we'll see you again soon.